All right. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm glad that we got to that. My name's Carl, Carl Anthony, and I am the founder of the Anthony Group and a longtime friend of wipe that smirk off your face. A longtime friend of this gorgeous specimen of a human being sitting in front of me, Gareth Nock. Wait, I have to remember I'm not the host. I go into host mode right away. So for today's episode, anyhow,
Well,
yeah, it's me.
it's you. It's
Yeah,
Carl Anthony. So
it is.
that was probably the best intro we've ever done on the show in 50 episodes. So I enjoyed it, and we had a good laugh about it prior to pressing record. So I'm glad we got through that. It was good. It felt genuine. So I'm happy.
Well, it. Let me say something on your behalf. Gareth meant no offense to the 49 other guests that he's had on. Sorry to each and every one of you. And two, it really was tough for me to do that whole knock knock bit. We may need to brainstorm that.
Yeah. We'll schedule that in the calendar.
Perfect.
So this is gonna be a fun episode.
I'm just taking a sip of my water from my Popeyes shaker.
Oh, look at that! Yeah,
Not sponsored by Popeyes yet.
No, not yet. So today's show, we're gonna talk health and fitness, and this is gonna be, I'm gonna say it's gonna be a somewhat unique episode because typically, as you know, if you listen regularly, you'll know that we talk to fitness experts that share, their bits of information and support the community, and we also share our member stories. So Carl's going to talk a lot about the parts of health and fitness, and there's a few key things we're going to touch on, and I'll just share a little bit of backstory. So we've been friends for many, many years, decades, and spent lots of time training together, and we've been surrounded by health and fitness. This is where we met originally, in the gym, and it's a little bit different. So I'd say that you've been on whether you wanted it or not, been on the receiving end of my coaching a fair bit, and we've spent lots of time going back and forward and doing our workouts. And I know a lot about your story, but we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But you are truly an advocate for health and fitness, and quite honestly, how it saved your life in more than one ways, which is what we're going to dive into a little bit. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit different, but there's going to be some massive value. And we're going to hear about maybe the less typical benefits of health and fitness, or maybe the things we don't hear enough about in the media.
And one thing you and I, and as you said, we've been friends for a long time. And many years ago, you and I gave each other permission. We verbally gave each other permission to just speak openly and speak candidly without the need for disclaimers. However, your listeners may not sort of know our style of communicating. So one quick disclaimer that I will make is whatever I'm about to share with Gareth and the listeners, I just need to make it crystal clear that don't misinterpret my sort of passion for health and fitness with arrogance or being sanctimonious. I think the common thread in what we may uncover over the next, half hour, 45 minutes is I would love if there was somebody out there, and if they can listen to this episode and benefit from our conversation and not have to do the 30 years of exploring the rights and the wrongs. Let's just really simplify it down to its core essentials. And perhaps a lot of the things that become really overwhelming with starting a fitness journey or a health journey, and maybe we should even stop using the word fitness, because I think that in of itself can be a little overwhelming. So let's just call it, overall health and wellness. If we can lighten the burden of what it takes to start a health and wellness journey, because of our combined 60 years of of doing it, then that would be a success in my view.
Couldn't agree more. And I love that, that approach, and hopefully I know that will resonate with a lot of people listening. So what I want to start by diving into is linked to what you said, and also linked to how we step into our health and fitness journeys. And the reason it can be overwhelming is that we're trying to achieve this destination. Whereas what we're going to hear a little bit about with your background is how you are preparing for something that I assume you quite literally never thought was going to happen to you. And the result of whatever reason you started your health and fitness journey, you probably didn't think about this, but it's something that came up and happened to you. And, it was huge. It was,
Yeah.
Let's say it was the reason you're here. So share, first of all, a little bit about what happened to you many years ago.
Yeah.
And and then we'll dive into how. I'll leave it with you.
Okay. I'm not going back to when I was 3 years old. We don't have. This isn't our. Gareth and I used to run a podcast together, and we would routinely do 3 to 3.5 hour episodes. So this isn't that. I'm cognizant, but I was always a very, very undersized human up until maybe 14 or 15 years old. I mean, I was just over 5 feet tall and very skinny, no mass whatsoever. And I got teased and bullied about it quite a bit. And then, I grew a foot and still didn't put on any weight. So I was even skinnier. But with complete transparency, I started, and I'm just going to call it lifting, working out. I started lifting purely based on vanity. I liked the aesthetics of being muscular. And I was still young. I was in my early 20s. I mean, I'm 50. I'll be 51 soon. So 30 years ago, I started lifting simply for aesthetic reasons. I hadn't yet connected to sort of the functional reasons why you need to move your body and why you need to commit to health and wellness. It was purely aesthetic. I wanted to look good in a t-shirt. And perhaps more specifically, I wanted to look good not in a t-shirt. So I had gotten myself to, I would say, for somebody that doesn't compete, I never had any aspirations to compete, but I had gotten myself to really quite phenomenal shape. I was relatively low body fat. I was extremely strong. I had a lot of muscle mass on my frame. And then in my very early 30s, the year was 2003. I had a very severe, that's an understatement, but a very severe motorcycle accident. Statistically perfect. I was a block from home. It was roads that I knew. I was doing the speed limit, shockingly. It was a lovely sunny afternoon, and it happened to be my birthday. And I had just had dinner with some family, and I was now going home to drop off my bike, and I was going to go out and see some friends and party. That fateful day, I was hit by a car, and long story short, other than my spinal cord, basically broke every bone in my body. My knees, femur, fib, tib, feet, arms, ribs, skull, hands, everything was broken. 3 of my 4 limbs are filled with surgical implants and titanium. And during my recovery, I was at St. Mike's, which, shout out to St. Mike's, phenomenal facility. During my recovery, on more than one occasion, the surgeons would comment that probably what saved your life, Carl, is that you were muscular. Because you were in good shape and because your frame was carrying muscle mass and created some strength and some rigidity, your physicality probably saved your life. And at the time, I didn't quite understand what that meant. But of course, over the next 20 years, I've sort of unpacked the correlation between physical strength and functionality. And as you said, Gareth, from the outset, all the stuff that might happen to you that you don't necessarily plan for. And I equate it to, but when you get in your car, you put on your seatbelt. When you get in your car, your intention isn't to crash into a telephone pole. Of course, your intention is to just get to your destination in one piece, unscathed. But you put the seatbelt on just in case. And to me, health and wellness, physical fitness, lifting weights, I started to understand that as my seatbelt. That was I've got this just in case something happens. Now, without being too morose, because certainly not everybody's going to experience hopefully not everybody's going to experience a near fatal accident. But to dumb it down, that just in case, that seatbelt metaphor, well, that might be carrying groceries from the trunk of your car up 2 flights of stairs. That might be spending an afternoon playing with your children. If you have, as I do, aging parents, being able to go to their house and help them with nicks and knacks around the house and carry stuff for them. And my mother had shoulder replacement surgery a couple of years ago, and there were many instances where I physically had to carry her. So it's all of those finding the things in your own life, and this is maybe the unique part for each and every one of your listeners. You have to understand why do you, and I'm just slapping this metaphor to death, but why do you wear your seatbelt, right? So connect to all of the reasons why being the best version of yourself physically, why that may help protect you against all of the, I was about to cuss, all of the stuff that could happen in life, because it's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
So when something happens, what version of you do you want to be able to absorb that incident? And a great example that would be the counter of what I just shared, and I won't mention names, but we have a young woman that lives in our community, and she's the opposite of somebody connected to physical and mental health. She is morbidly obese, morbidly inactive, and has makes a lot of poor choices. And she was injured while tobogganing a couple of winters ago. And as a result of her physical lack of condition, she was virtually bedridden for a year. It took her body so long to recover, because not only is her body trying to recover from an injury, but her body was just trying to recover from the morbidity of what she had become. So I don't know if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
But certainly that's one of many instances where my physicality has saved my life. I've had surgeries over the years as a result of follow-up surgeries from the accident. I just recently had hernia surgery, as you know, and my surgeon is baffled. Like he's like, you're ridiculous. Now there's some mental fortitude there as well, and a little bit of healthy spite. But all the surgeons commented, because I've had my follow-ups, all of the surgeons commented, like, dude, you should be in a medical book. For good reasons. I've had that said to me before, not for good reasons.
Well, I always, at risk of sounding a bit morbid, but I always like hearing that story, and I've heard it many, many times, and we've talked about it, and I've had the long version. That was the short version, which is always fascinating that the body can withstand, when it's prepared, can withstand so many things, like so many traumas, and get through those things. And I kept thinking about something I say all the time when I talk about the way the spine moves and the way the body should move, and try and refer our coaching and what we do to everyday stuff. And I always use slipping on the ice as an example, just to back up what you were saying, right? No one ever thinks they're going to slip on the ice. But when you do it and you're weak, like you said, right, there's people who are in hospital for 2 months or whatever, rather than just, I'm just going to get back up again, or I'm going to be able to withstand that. And there's so many facets to our physical fitness that affects that. And it really is it's just a testimonial that beats all others. Like you can recover and withstand so much when you focus on your strength, and you focus on what you don't think's coming.
Absolutely.
Right? Huge.
There's another part to it. I think there's another part to it as well. And one of the things that I'm personally, and the Nock Academy, you guys do a phenomenal job of this. But one of the things that I see as really an outsider to the fitness industry, I really applaud the trend, the shift in the trend of, let's just simplify health and fitness. And for 5 decades, fitness was this complex organism that nobody quite understood. And the only way to maybe get the tip of the iceberg was to spend a lot of friggin' money on coaches and experts. And now we've really just simplified it. Move your body. There are intrinsic benefits. And one of the things that's starting to become talked about more and more, and maybe this will tie into the second item that you and I discussed before recording, working out, and I work out 6 to 7 days a week. It's hard. Yeah. And many days it's awful. Like, there's no romanticizing it. And as you know, Gareth, I converted my garage to a home gym. And when it's minus 27, we live in Canada. When it's minus 27 and it's 5 o'clock in the morning, it's awful. But what I've come to connect to, and I'm going somewhere with this, so thank you for the long leash here. What I've started to understand is the discipline that's required to go and lift a thing, to go and work out. That takes discipline. That discipline, it doesn't end when your workout ends. It bleeds into all other facets of your life. You and I are both entrepreneurs. We're both small business owners. There are many, many days when the last thing I want to do is run my business. But I do it. That discipline is not something that is separate from the discipline required to get up at 5 and go work out. Now, if we continue with the prepare for the slipping on the ice example, if we continue with that analogy, to recover from adversity in life, whether it's physical or emotional, takes discipline. Complacent, lazy people don't recover from adversity. Yeah. Disciplined, passionate, hardworking, motivated people can take almost anything. So it's that one thing becomes from an efficacy standpoint, that one act of moving your body bleeds into all other facets of your life. And I'm going to quote, not verbatim, but I'm going to quote a book that you and I both love, is Discipline Equals Freedom by Jocko Willink, a retired Navy SEAL and just an overall badass. And he gets up at 4:30 every morning, whether he likes it or not, and he goes and works out. And his theory is, do the hardest thing first. And then the rest of your day, like, so you lose a deal at work. Who cares? So, you have a disagreement with your partner or your children. You've done the hardest part of your day. You've created that launching pad for I keep using this word, but that launching pad for discipline and working through things. So everything else becomes, I'm not going to say easy, because life's not easy. I think let's all just be honest with each other. Let's stop romanticizing that life is easy, and that when it's hard, it's uniquely hard to us, because that's all baloney. Everyone has a hard life. Everyone has adversity in their life. But what version of you do you want to create to face those things?
Yeah, that is so true. And it, as much as, at the Nock Academy, we talk about, trying to find exercise solutions that, in part you enjoy to do, or you enjoy aspects of it. And whether that be the people, whether that be the workouts, the variety, whatever it is, there's always going to be those times. And I said this morning, that I had a group Monday mornings. We kick off the week with 6:30 workout. It's generally pretty challenging at that time in the morning for everyone. And it's a tough workout. And as I said to him at the end of it, I'm like, hopefully you got up this morning, and if you were pumped up and fired up and it was one of those days and you really loved it, that's awesome. Like, that's going to wash off to the rest of your day. And if you woke up, you felt like crap, and the last thing you wanted to do was work out, you just did potentially what is going to be the hardest thing of your day, and everything else is going to seem easy. So it is both those things, right? Because there are, like you said, there's days where you don't want to do it. There's days where you don't want to run the business, but there's other days where you're like, I'm the best entrepreneur in the world. I totally get that. And I think our health and fitness is exactly the same. And you spoke really, really well to something that I talk, you didn't exactly say this, but about how life is a bit of an ecosystem. And if, just like an ecosystem in nature, if one part of that is failing, everything else is getting pulled down as well. And that's life. And what you said, you've got to find ways to be disciplined, because they all cross over to one another, and that affects everything in our life.
Yeah. And I would wonder, wherever you post this throughout your platforms, and no cheating to the listeners, but I would love for people to provide you with what they think the word discipline actually means. And I'm going to paraphrase, so spoiler alert, but really what discipline means is that you become your own disciple. You are a worshiper of you. What's wrong with that? Like, if worshiping your body and your mind, and we might start doing some hot yoga and burning some incense in a second, but if you hear a gong, it's because we've gone a little too far. But what's wrong with worshiping yourself? I mean, go to your ecosystem. 90% of the ecosystem that we all live in is set up to destroy us.
Yeah.
Like, our world is not set up to make us succeed. It's quite the opposite. So through your own self-worship, if you can stack the deck and be better than, and I'm saying it, speaking plainly, be better than the person next to you. If your ecosystem is more survivable than the person next to you, with a relatively minimal commitment, like, what are we talking about? We're talking 3, 4, 5 hours a week, like a week. So, and just, I know there's a third part to what we wanted to discuss, but before we get there, we said from the outset that this is based on truth and transparency. As I said, I had hernia surgery, and shout out to the amazing team down at Toronto Western, Dr. Alan Okranik, who he's next level. He was an absolute savant when it comes to hernia surgery. But I was told explicitly, no working out at all for 2 weeks. And I'll be honest with you, G, I was not awesome to be around. And if we brought my wife and kids into the show, they would just agree right away. And particularly, it was weird. The first few days, I had given myself permission to take 3 or 4 days to just be a lazy blob. And I watched 40 hours of Netflix. I mean, it was just gross. But the next 5 or 6 days after that, I was awful. And only so on the 14th day, on week 2 of my recovery, I had my first workout. And I came back into the house. As I said, my gym's in my garage. I came back into the house, and it was like I had just freebased some ephedra. Like I was fired up. And I was like, hey, babe, how you doing? Okay, Maxim, slap him in the ass. Have a great day at school. Jen, oh, my God, you look hot. Give me a kiss. Like I was just bang, 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 bang. And I finally went, oh, because like all this dopamine and this self-worth and this discipline, like it's undisciplined acts create self-loathing. Disciplined acts create self-value. Fat, lazy people don't love themselves. Sorry, Captain Obvious, but now the flip side is shredded fitness models also don't love themselves. But that's another conversation.
Oh, isn't it just? You made some really great points, and a couple of things I want to go back round to because I think it's so important. Is first of all, when you talk about that discipline, what I want to clarify for people listening is it can be a colossal act, but it doesn't have to be. And I actually made a post about it today. So this is great timing. We're recording this on a Monday morning, and I made a post about taking a 3-minute action in your day because it allows you to tick something off. It allows you to celebrate that success of, hey, I did something. And it might be, you might have done 50 push-ups first thing when you woke up in the morning. You may have done some stretching. You may anything, could have been anything, could have done something for your business, whatever it was. But that 3 minutes of success or that 3 minutes of discipline, because you do have to be disciplined to create consistency, fuels that fire. So it could be an hour workout where you absolutely destroy yourself. It might not be, but it's still finding that thing you can be disciplined. And it's an action of discipline that's going to create forward momentum. So to your point, it changes your physical state, your mental state, your emotional state. And it doesn't have to be colossus, but it can be as well. So I think that's really important. And to your point about, finding something you can do because you weren't able to, this is why I'm such a huge advocate of walking, because there's almost nothing unless I broke an ankle or a leg or something that would stop me walking. So it's almost impossible for me to find an excuse not to do it. Whereas sometimes if, I'm going to go push some like heavy deadlifts and my back's a bit sore, it's easy to say, maybe I'll leave it another day. Right. So it's also finding those things in your life. And I'm not saying everyone has to make walking their number one thing. However, we should all probably walk a bit more. That is so important because you almost can't avoid it. So it's a great way to be disciplined.
Yeah. And I'll segue that comment because I think it aligns well with what I wanted to say is, and I love your use of the term ecosystem. The reality is the vast majority of us live in an ecosystem where a lot of the noise that surrounds us is extreme. And what I mean by that is, you see Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson working out. His version of discipline is unachievable by 100% of the world. Let's just be honest. Other extremes maybe with financial wealth, other extremes with the way a person looks. Our ecosystems, we're constantly being bombarded with these extreme messages of what it takes to be that. And I think the reality is that's the first thing So if we really want to unpack this, oh God, I hate that term. And you know that too. I just a little bit. If we really want to understand it, perhaps you could argue the first act of discipline, and maybe the hardest, the first act of discipline, turn off the noise. Because otherwise, if you think, whoever, if you think, and I'm just going to use The Rock, because everyone knows who he is, or it, maybe, he is a cyborg. If you think The Rock, if you think that's what discipline looks like, you're fucked.
Yep.
But you will have unhealthy failures, not healthy failures, because there is a difference. You will have unhealthy failures, and you will not be consistent if that's what you think discipline looks like. But turn off that noise and go for a 3-minute push-up session. Go for a 10-minute walk. If you live in a house with stairs, do 5 flights of stairs. And if that's your discipline in the absence of noise, then that's the beginning of your journey.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I suggest everyone just skips back like 2 minutes on this episode and listens to that again. I couldn't have said it better, but I do want to add something to it that is so important.
I couldn't have said it better, but I will.
I'm not going to say it better. I'm going to extend, because there's a point
that's like what somebody says. That's like somebody says, okay, look, I mean no disrespect, but you're an idiot. Wait, what? I couldn't have said it better, but let me go ahead and give it a shot.
So
this, by the way, to all the viewers, not listeners, this is what 30 years of friendship looks like.
Yeah, right. So I just want to go back to someone's perceived level of discipline, or what they look like as a result of that, the wealth that you mentioned, and somebody's look, right? How attractive somebody is, whatever that might be. Here's the other thing that just needs to be said, and this is why I wasn't trying to say it better, but kind of I was.
I know.
Is what someone's wealth appears to be. You don't know really truly, because you'll hear a story like their Genesis story, but it might not be true. They may have come from a place of extreme privilege, where they had a lot of money, where they could go and make potentially their own money, but came from a place where they were very privileged to do that. But you don't see that. Somebody who looks a certain way, who's blessed with incredible genetics, who just turns up and is absolutely attractive to every other person on the planet, you don't see that. So striving for something when that person's got exceptional genetics, or, there's a lot of Photoshop happening, right? And then you go back to the whole fitness thing, and this, I'm absolutely not accusing anyone of this that we may or may have not spoken about, but you also don't know what they're injecting in their body to look like that,
right, and
be that disciplined. So it's the whole comparison's the thief of joy, right? Like as soon as you see those things, it's like, whoa, I want to have that wealth, and if I just work really hard, I'll get it. Maybe you won't, and maybe you won't have a body like that, and maybe so. Exactly what you said, when you turn that off and you focus on what you want, it's huge. So we went a bit left field, but I think that was really important to know. And I also want to share, and this is going to align really nicely with the next point too, is what you essentially spoke about 5 minutes ago, when you spoke about the discipline and what that gave you, and being your own kind of worshiping yourself. It was like I loved it so much, and it's so powerful, because it was your interpretation, which will resonate with so many people, of self-care, self-love. The problem with that whole phrase and the popularity of it in the media right now is some people are just like, it makes them want to puke, right? They're like, oh, self-care, self-love. It's so like hippie and like woo-woo. Yeah. People hate it. But I feel the way you put it across is a completely different approach that we don't hear enough of. So it's a little bit harsher, and it might grind on a few people, and it's a little bit more focused on the discipline, but it's essentially exactly the same thing.
Yeah. And the other thing you and I gave each other permission for many years ago is we don't apologize to each other for our opinions and how we communicate. I mean, if I'm wrong or if you're wrong, we're the first to apologize and hug each other and share expressions of love. I don't want people to misinterpret. But to be unapologetic about your position on something is a very powerful form of permission. And there's one last thing that I want to, probably not one last thing, you know me well enough, but an additional thing, let's do that. This will tie into some more harshness, some more brutal reality. If you are trapped in the vortex of social media, and if that's what you're comparing yourself to, okay, try an experiment. I'm a big fan of experiments. So try an experiment. Give yourself 1 week. Turn off, and I call it the noise, because I do believe it's noise. Turn off the noise for 1 week. Now, you may have a social media outlet that you need. So for me, it's LinkedIn. I have to have LinkedIn for my business. That's the only social media I am on, like, no matter what. If you can turn off the noise for 1 week, but perhaps you are not emotionally evolved enough yet to have no noise, you still need a bit. Go to your local grocery store. Go to your kid's soccer match. Go to the library. Go to the movie theater. Look at what is actually your ecosystem, not the socialized ecosystem that we're all trapped. Once upon a time, I was trapped in, but look at your own ecosystem. And if you still feel the need to gauge yourself based on what is peripheral, if you are starting to make disciplined choices, I guarantee 99% of what you see in your ecosystem, you are better than that.
Yeah,
it's around us, man. Like, turn off the noise and look at your own world. It's comparisons. I'm not saying this is healthy, but this is real. People compare themselves to other people. And what I'm suggesting is compare yourself to reality. Compare yourself to the person getting a large bag of M&Ms and a triple butter popcorn with a liter of Coke at the movie theater. Like, if you still need to compare to reality and reward yourself with disciplined acts and disciplined choices, because you are better than that.
Yeah. And it comes back to the whole, and I mentioned it earlier, that the celebrating those things, right? Like, we don't celebrate that to look around. And like you said, we all do it. We all have comparison, no matter how much we talk about not doing it, we all do it. And I challenge anyone to prove to me that they don't. So I 100% agree with you on that. And it's so true that when we can look and celebrate and say, hey, I'm doing a really good job of my health and well-being. I'm doing a really good job as a parent. I'm doing, and celebrate those things. And if, and if you have to look around you and say, my follow-up to that, and again, I'm not trying to make it better, but my follow-up is, if you're in that situation, you say, hey, you know what? I think my health, and I'm going to use my business as an example, my health and well-being as a busy parent that's trying to navigate the chaos of life is able to do that. And I'm celebrating myself. Is why can't I use that to help other people? Yeah. That's why the Nock Academy exists, because I want to say, hey, you know what? You can do this. You can navigate that as a parent with a kid and a business and what have you. Let us help you do that, because I see that there's ways to do it and how it makes you a better person in every area of your life.
Yeah. We, yet again, you and I are on the same page. And here's a little dose of transparency. I had a 10,000 calorie day yesterday. I mean, can you, to the average person, I don't know if you can comprehend what 10,000 calories looks like, but it's basically, I was at a wedding on Saturday night and I had a few cocktails. So Sunday, this was mapped out. I'd made a decision. I am not saying no to myself the entire Sunday. I had a pizza at 9:30 in the morning, not a slice. I had a large pepperoni pizza at 9 in the morning. I had Doritos. I had a bowl of ice cream. I had some sour Jolly Ranchers. I mean, I had 10,000 calories of food, and I gave myself permission to do that. But that's once in a couple of weeks or once in a month. So that part of the last thing I'll say, and then there is something before we run out of time I want to talk about. Part of being disciplined, part of that self-worship, and without getting into any sort of non-interpersonal connotations, part of self-worship is reward. And for me, reward is a really nice whiskey or a great pizza or chips in a movie. So
yeah,
and you've been amazing at that ever since I've known you. You'll map out. You've got this down to a science. You know what's happening on Saturday. Like, I'm having a bottle of wine and a pizza with my wife, so I need to create a 200 calorie per day deficit Monday to Friday, so that on Saturday I can just pin it and not worry.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that is the process of that is different for everybody. And that, kind of disclaimer on that is you've got to find what works for you, because there's a million ways to manage your lifestyle. And some people that works and some people it doesn't. And again, complete transparency, like I can do it now, but it's a process. Like it's not even, I wouldn't even say it's habitual at this point. Even now, after like 20 years of trying to figure out that, it's still a working process where I'm like, okay, let's be aware of what my weeks looks like. How do I balance my lifestyle? And that's from someone that talks about health and fitness every second of the day I'm awake for the most part. So it is still a process, and you've got to find, like you said, you find that reward for yourself, right? You find that, and if that works for you and doesn't create disordered behaviors, great, use it, because everyone has a different approach. And that's why I try not to kind of poo-poo anyone's ideas around that, because everyone's reward system is a little different. And if it's order, if your habits are orderly, then you're probably on a good thing. So I think that's really important.
Well, and I think just to close that loop, I think what you decided, and I'm sure many of the Nock Academy members and myself and et cetera, but I think what the key decision is do you want to be a tourist in your own life? I mean, you go on vacation and let's say you go somewhere that is not your native birthplace, it's not a return to home or whatever. You go and you visit a location, and we all know what being a tourist feels like. You never really quite feel like you fit in. You don't really know what to do or where to go. You don't really know what the best choices are. Being a tourist also comes with risk. If you make the wrong choice as a tourist, you go down the wrong alley, you go to the wrong part of town, there's consequences. Are you a tourist in your own life? Health and wellness, that's not something you want to visit every now and then and not know your way around. You need to be the captain at the helm. You need to be the most active participant in your own life. You need to be the worshiper of you, not the tourist of your life, because probably, not unequivocally, but probably you will reach a point and maybe you will be cursed with a moment of reflection right before you leave this earth. And you'll go, oh shit, I just spent 85 years as a fucking tourist. That's a curse I don't want.
Yeah, me either. That's powerful. We went deep on that, but I like it. It's impactful, and it'll definitely, I think there's so many ways to link that analogy to we'll go back to the ecosystem, right? Like to link those things together with that analogy. So I think it's perfect. So
do you want to say it better?
No, I don't think so. I think we're good. I think we got. I'm going to be quiet on that one. So the last thing you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. And you and I have, so long before the Nock Academy existed, and you and I have had this conversation for many years. And in fact, most of the times we've had this conversation, it had no financial consequence to you or your family. There was no benefit in you agreeing with me. Now, it so happens that you are a business owner and you've got an absolutely phenomenal organization. And I encourage each and every one of whoever's listening to this and wherever this ends up going. And yeah, this is a shameless plug, but God damn it, check out the Nock Academy. But the one thing that you and I have discussed over the years, and I've always struggled with this, is, and we'll go back to using the word permission, because I think people will understand that. I would suggest to those hearing this show, get a pad of paper and a pen. Write down, and it'll probably be a fairly short list, but write down a list of the things you give yourself permission to invest in. So maybe you own a piece of real estate, 1. Maybe you've got an RRSP or an RESP, 2. Maybe you invest in, I don't know, you got Netflix. That's an investment. Maybe you invest in, you know what, I get a Starbucks on the drive to work. That's an investment. Write down a list of all of the things that you invest in. And then understand, of those investments, what actually connects to an investment in mental and physical health. We are so prepared to spend money on stuff, and we are so allergic, speaking plainly, we are so allergic to spending money on actual self-improvement. It's like, oh, what? You want me to spend $50 a month on health and wellness? No, I can't do that. That's way too much money. $600 a year? Do you know what I could do with $600 a year? Yeah, I know what you could do with 600, but probably we know what you are going to do with 600. Nothing. It's going to be a fucking donut from Krispy Kreme, or it's going to be ordering something off of Amazon. Like, so look at your body and your soul and your mind as the first thing in your entire portfolio of wealth. It is the first and only thing that I believe, if sacrifices need to be made in order to make that investment, that's the thing for it. Not your kid's college fund. Now, I'm speaking from a place of privilege. Not your retirement savings, not the house that you own. Because does any of that mean anything if you're infirmed, if you're dead, if you're battling a disease or cardiac issue? Like, does any of it mean anything if you aren't there for it? No. So what's the irrefutable way, and there's no guarantees, but what is the irrefutable way to maximize your likelihood? Again, no guarantees, but to maximize your likelihood of a long, healthy life. Physical, mental health. Duh.
Yeah, and to follow on from that, it can be I made a post about this on LinkedIn a while ago. It was a poll. Is we're talking in terms of, well, how I'm interpreting it right now is in terms of financial investment, but it's also, it could just be a commitment investment. It could be so many things. Yes, it can be financial, and typically if you want good quality, you want to get rid of the noise and all those things, yes, you need to invest some money in it. But to my point earlier, walking's free and it's an investment in your health and well-being. So there are many ways to do it. And yeah, it's so true, right? Like you invest all your money in those things, and then someone sells it and it pays taxes on everything, and you're left with nothing really, right? And
Yeah.
there's almost, in a lot of cases now in the modern world, is there's almost no one's really benefiting from it. Like even the people that are inheriting whatever you've got aren't benefiting it from it that much.
Yeah.
So it's so huge. And we have this conversation in our house all the time. And it is, do we invest? Like, do we buy a house? Do we try and find those things? Because we don't really have a lot of investments. Like we live the lifestyle we like without really much investment, equally without much debt either. So that's also great. But that's kind of my mentality. Like, I don't know how long I'm going to be here for. If the opportunity presents itself, sure. But you have to make tough choices sometimes to invest in you, right? That's why starting a business was so important. That's why educating myself is so important. Like I just, to my overwhelmed and anxious behavior right now, I just enrolled in a new course, which I'm doing. And the same thing, right? It cost me money. Like I got to drop $1,300 that, I'm glad the business is doing well and I can afford to do it. But I could say, well, that's a lot of money. Could I be spending that on something else? But I'm spending it on my knowledge and my education because it's an investment in me and it's going to benefit my mental and my emotional health 100%. So it's so important.
Well, I remember 100 years ago when I used to, I, as you know, Gareth, of course, I'm going to call myself a trainer. But that's not to insinuate that I'm in the same company as you or anyone at the Nock Academy is. Of course, that's not my intention. But 100 years ago, when I was a trainer, one of the obstacles that I was really gifted at overcoming was when people would put up an allergy around the financial commitment. And I said, okay, here's a great example. Let's say you've lost the 20 pounds that you want to lose. You've increased your muscle mass. Your mental health has improved. You're off your medications. You're not on antidepressants. You're not on blood pressure. You're not on cholesterol pills. You are where you feel that you're the best version of yourself. And let's say that journey costs you $10,000. Just spitballing numbers. When we get you to that journey, if I said to you, I'm going to give you back your $10,000, but as a result, you're going to get those 20 pounds back. Your cholesterol is going to go back up. Your blood pressure is going to skyrocket. Your mood, your energy, your depressive state's going to come sweeping back in. Do we have a deal? Fuck no, of course we don't. I love where I am. Keep your 10,000 because I love where I am. So start to articulate. And there are two conversations here, and I don't know how we are for time. As usual, I talk too much. But if we're talking about the financial investment, I realize that, our imagination becomes dulled the further we get from being a child. But for a moment, be playful. Get into your little boy or your little girl or your however you identify, little person identity for a second, and imagine you are the best version of yourself within your own ecosystem. What would it cost to undo all of that? It's priceless. Like if somebody said to me, here's $1 million, but here's that's what it's going to cost. You're going to be overweight, out of shape, sad, angry, depressed, on a list of medications, reliant on pharmaceuticals to get out of bed and go to bed. It's not worth it. So stop using the excuse of money. And the other thing, because I remember your poll, and again, you and I have discussed this over the years. If it's time, folks, that's the only thing you can't get more of. So nobody is too busy. I don't care who you are. Nobody is too busy to not worship themselves for half an hour a day. Nobody. And if you are, you're a tourist.
I like the way we went full circle on that.
No, it's if you are so busy that you are still using time as an excuse to worship yourself, then you are a tourist in your own life and you are not in control. You are not at the helm. Because somebody that's in control of their lives, and I realize that control is a fabrication, But somebody that is in control of the disciplined acts within their lives, maybe that's a better way to put it, has the time. Because we don't spend it, brother. We don't spend time. Too many people do. Take that out of your lexicon. Time is an investment. It's not something to be spent. Time is the only thing where if you invest it wisely, maybe, just maybe, there'll be a return on it.
And I truly mean it this time. I couldn't put that any better. And I'm not going to, but I am going to recommend that everybody just picks up, especially that last bit, but so many bits of this conversation, and just lets that sink in. And maybe like we said, you're writing things down and making notes. Maybe you write down investment on a piece of paper and just stick it up on your wall and think about it. Think about what those investments are and how that looks in your world, and how do you create some positive change around that. I love that. I think that's a great place to wrap up the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. You and the entire team at the Nock Academy. It's imperative. When I was going in for surgery a couple weeks ago, he's already laughing because he knows what I'm going to say. I had a list, and it was a short list, but I had a list of people that I sent a text message to right before I went into surgery, because shit happens. I mean, as much as we're talking about being strong and able-bodied, shit happens. And I was, I don't want my last words to one of my dearest friends on this earth to be, whatever ridiculous text I sent you a month ago. So I sent Gareth a text, and I mean it. I meant it, and I mean it. You can't stop doing what you're doing. The world needs you. The world needs the Nock Academy, whether they know it or not. And maybe it's not the world, but certainly this ecosystem, the one you've created, you're too important. So stay focused. Stay not being a tourist, which is a choice you made 2 years ago. And stay disciplined, friends.
Definitely going to do that. As always, an incredible conversation. I am extremely fortunate to have had many of these, and now everyone listening today has been privy to this conversation as well, and hopefully you get a lot from it. Again,
let's not get carried away.
All right, carried away. We will finish up the show by thank you for your time, your wisdom, and another great conversation that we're going to be lucky to have many more of in the future. And it is listening to this episode, hopefully, was an investment today in some way, shape, or form. That is it for today. As always, if you've got something from the show, please share it with someone you love and care about. Spread the word. We rely on that organic growth of the show and getting more conversations out there. We truly think we're making a difference in the world, and we appreciate your comments to that effect. So yeah, get it out there, share it with everybody, and stay tuned for another incredible episode next week.